Did you know that Rex and Addam are both drivers of the Aegis? Well, if you didn't, now you do, and that is but one of the many connections the two guys have between them. But perhaps the most important one, or the most important idea about any of this stuff, is their relationship, and whether or not they're actually related by blood. I, for the most part, have actually taken this as fact in previous videos, but today I'm going to examine things in a bit more detail and try to hopefully convince you guys that's the truth, and if it turns out that there are things that make it obviously not the truth, then we'll know. So, spoilers for this game and that game. Let's do the thing. First off, we should probably go over the superficial and really obvious stuff. Besides the fact that they both happen to be Aegis drivers, Mithra did see a vision of Rex when she was still resonated with Addam, and personality-wise they're pretty similar. Addam's obviously a lot older, but I could definitely see Rex in a decade or so being a lot like Addam, assuming something horrific doesn't happen to temper his positive attitude. I guess you could also say they're similar in appearance, and in the base game, where Addam is always hooded because it was before his design was finalized, since they didn't even know that they were doing Torna for the DLC campaign, they only modeled part of his face, and that part bears a striking resemblance to an older Rex. We've also got Malos noticing something in both of their eyes, except for the part where both games are really vague on what he means by that, although we do at least know that in Addam's case he's recognizing him as a bastard. The other two members of the Tornan royal family we see have blue eyes, as do, I believe, a lot of the other human citizens of Torna, so this means that Addam's mother is, first off, not the mother of the king's other children, if he has any, and second off, not purely Tornan in blood. The implication seems to be that Malos saw Addam's eyes, recognized both his status as a bastard and some form of determination or something from them, and then recognized the same thing in Rex and was like, oh, now I get why that guy's the Aegis' driver or something. But, interestingly enough, Rex and Addam do have different eye colors, and Rex's color is almost identical to Laura's, who definitely died without having any children, so it's not like he's a descendant of her, but it's also really weird that since they designed Addam afterwards, they outright chose to give him a different eye color, although I suppose it could have been since Laura was already designed, already had the same eye color, so they didn't want to, like, imply Addam and Laura were related or something. I'm not really sure about that one, but it's still weird, and is more of a thing against the possibility of them being related than anything. There is also Pyra outright stating that Rex reminds Mithra of Addam, but again, I just interpreted that always as a personality-related thing, or even a fighting style one, seeing as how Rex was trained by Gramps, who knew Addam personally 500 years ago. With that though, it's time to start exploring things that could be evidence to the positive, things that support the idea of Rex being a descendant of Addam. The first one isn't even in-universe, it's the fact that it would make a lot of narrative sense. The young boy, 500 years removed from his hero prince ancestor, finishing the job of his forefather by taking up the mantle of Aegis driver, fighting Malos, and generally saving the world. It's also important to remember that Rex grew up in Fonset Village, which was founded by Addam after the fall of Torna, and according to Zeke, someone like Rex, i.e. the exact kind of person the world needed, could only have come from Fonset. More on that in my video about why I love Fonset so much, which you should totally watch. That would make a lot of poignant sense where how, yeah, Addam ultimately failed in his quest, but his legacy would be completely responsible for his own descendants succeeding, so that would be pretty cool, but saying, yeah, that would make a really good fictional narrative isn't exactly a lot of evidence to support something happening in-universe. Since similar appearances and personalities kind of mean nothing with 500 years of genetic drift in the way, and the eye thing is more of a weird contradiction than anything else, the next biggest supporting evidence is definitely the matter of the Leftherian and Tornan seals. Remember, at the beginning of the game, Torna, the terrorists not the kingdom, are looking for Leftherian salvagers and Leftherian salvagers alone to accompany them to raise the ancient ship and try to recover Pyra's body. This is because, for some reason, only they can open the seals laid by Torna, the kingdom not the terrorists, on various doors and things that would have been blocking Malos and Jin's approach to where Pyra was being held. we see Rex open a couple of these seals as well as one on Elpis, and they all share a symbol. This symbol is also represented as the crest of the Leftherian archipelago, which makes a lot of sense. Fonset is the biggest settlement we see there, founded by Addam, also contains Elpis, a Tornan royal thing that literally uses the same symbol in multiple places, and on the larger crest of the Kingdom of Tantal, which contains a lot of people who are legitimately descendants of Torna, and its royal family claims to be descendants of Addam, so they would totally use his thing. The most obvious explanation is that Leftherians, or Leftherian humans at least, since we know as a fact Gormati and Napon also live there, are all or mostly descended from Addam or from people of Torna, and as such would have certain markers in their DNA allowing them to open seals that were designed to be opened by Tornans. It's worth noting that Malos doesn't see the familiarity with Addam in Rex's eyes until after choosing him to be the one to accompany them to open the seals. So it seems like legitimately any Leftherian would do, and they simply went with Rex because they knew he was capable of fighting. This does still raise a couple of problems though, because, well, yeah, it's completely possible for one person's genes to be widely spread among their ethnic group after 500 years. They're still not going to reach everyone, and there are also plenty of Leftherian humans who would most likely call themselves Leftherian if you asked, who are refugees or immigrants from other places in the world. And it's not likely that any of those would have a drop of Tornan blood in them, so it is kind of weird that they so chose to do any of this stuff that way. It's most likely that they figured, yeah, we're gonna probably find descendants of Addam in Leftheria, and they were gonna just keep going through salvagers until they found one that worked, but it's still worth mentioning that there's some potentially flawed logic or flawed thinking in there, and it might just be that they somehow found out that Addam had set the seals to be opened by Leftherian blood, but then that would still make the immigrants not make sense, so it's really weird. It's probably that they were just gonna keep trying until they found an Addam descendant, but what do I know? The ancient ship was just kind of a Tornan military vessel, so it's likely that anyone who is a descendant of Tornan military, or possibly anyone with Tornan blood at all, would be able to open it. But the bigger thing that could potentially hint at Rex's ancestry is probably the opening to Spirit Crucible Elpis, because Addam describes it as the Royal Spirit Crucible. It's not just a place owned by Torna that happens to be in Leftheria and Addam decided to found his village after. It's literally property of the royal family, so I'd be very surprised if anyone besides the royal family and like some trusted generals and advisors and maybe the guys stationed around Fonset to guard it would be able to open it at all. So that's pretty interesting. We also actually get to see the same exact kind of seal a third time, and that one is not confirmed to be authentic Tornan make from before the kingdom fell. That is the one we see Zeke open, not Rex, in Tantal. It has virtually the same emblem on it, which makes sense since it's also being used as an emblem of Tantal, but because we don't exactly know the history of Genbu and what parts of it were exactly settled before Tantal, just by Tornans exploring it and stuff, and what came after the Aegis War, so we don't know if this was something that was made for the royal family or for important people to be able to get into the Genbu crown, or if it was something made afterwards by the Tantalese royal family to allow only them access to the Omega Fetter. What we do know is that Zeke could open it, and he is of Tornan blood, though not necessarily royalty, so it's most likely that it was at least overridden to only accept Tantalese royal family blood at some point. So, now we got some pretty strong supporting evidence. What about that to the contrary? Well, this is really weird because it involves Rex's parentage. We don't know where he was born, except that he definitely was not Fonset Village. All we know about him before he arrived there was that his parents were gravely injured from something and only made it to the doorstep of Fonset, thrusting Rex into Corinne's care before they ended up both passing away. They used Tantalese models to represent the parents in that flashback cutscene, and it's worth noting that Tantalese are used as stand-ins for their ancestors, the Tornans, in base game cutscenes that take place in Torna, since this was before the more unique Tornan citizen models were made for the Golden Country. So it could just be that they came from somewhere else in Leftheria where Tornan culture was more prevalent, but the other running theory is that they were actually Tantalese and were escaping. The reason they were escaping was not to try to get away from how crappy life in Tantal sometimes is, but because they were being persecuted by the royal family because they'd found out that they were the real descendants of Addam. That's a good theory, but there's also not much to support that, and you think that Zeke would have been told about that by his father when the whole "they're not the descendants of Addam" thing was revealed to him. Literally only the king seems to have known that, so it seems a little impossible there. Corinne theorizes that they were either escaping war, famine, or a dying titan. Dying titan doesn't really tell us much because, well, a lot of titans are dying, and there are probably hundreds of small titans with only a town or something that aren't actually nations. So they could just very well have come from another titan in Leftheria that happened to have sank. Famine, that was happening in more Ardain, but they're probably not Ardanian. So there's really no way to tell where Rex is actually from. If he's Leftherian, yeah, the chances of him being an Addam descendant skyrocket, and it's also possible that his family was descended from Addam, emigrated elsewhere, and then his parents decided to try to come back to Leftheria for whatever reason. Maybe they were actually trying to go back to their fatherland or something. Don't know about that, but we have no way of knowing where Rex came from, which is very, very damaging to this theory. Okay, as of now, we've got some pretty good evidence and a couple smaller theories to back it up. Some pretty weird evidence that could potentially be damning to the entire thing, but we have no idea of being able to tell if it's a problem at all because of how ambiguous it is. So, let's take a few steps back and figure out whether or not any of this is physically possible in the first place. As in, could Addam have even started a line that would have eventually ended in Rex? Well, we do know that he has a wife, and said wife is pregnant. It's part of the final side quest out of all of them in the Golden Country, so that's a good sign. But, seeing as how she's never seen on screen or mentioned outside of that side quest whatsoever, we have no idea of knowing if she escaped the fall of the whole Titan. Presumably, she lived in Aletta Villa with Addam, and in my opinion, that actually increases her chances for survival than if she were in Oresco. While yeah, Oresco did have more and better Titan ships, there were also less people to put on the smaller ships located in Lasaria and Aletta, and there is a ship dock like right next to the villa, so she'd be able to get out pretty easily. But also, Oresco had already been heavily damaged once. The huge siren battle was taking place basically overhead, and Malos was literally still attacking them while they were trying to escape. Plus, larger crowds mean bigger traffic jams trying to cram people on ships. That's always a bad sign. So, in my opinion, basically, if you lived in Lasaria or Aletta, and you got on a Titan ship, as long as the captain wasn't an idiot and flew towards the mech battle, you were probably completely home free. We also know that Addam didn't really want to do any of the royalty stuff. He just kind of wanted to be a farmy boy and have a nice, quiet lifestyle with his wife and, I guess, the kids that they intended to have. He did still do his princely duties as a result of his dedication and devotion to his people, and that's all fine and good. He was a legitimately good leader. And we also know that he eventually succeeded in having the quiet farming lifestyle once he founded Fonsad. What we don't know, though, is if he had a family while doing so. Obviously, if his wife escaped, they had at least one kid, and there you go, that's a potential family line right there. But if she died, that would just be another trauma on top of him losing his kingdom, most of his people, all of his best friends, and the Aegis, so he probably wouldn't feel up to getting close to anyone ever again, and that would mean his line would have died out there. But as long as she survived, and I'm saying she had a pretty high survival chance, everything would be completely good. Now, we don't have anything concrete to back up either side, but as long as his wife escaped, we're home free, and I have reason to believe that she did, so I'd say that yes, this is possible, and yes, there is a ton of supporting evidence. As for a final verdict, well, yeah, there are a couple weird points to the contrary. Working on this video actually made me believe in the theory even more than I already had. It was just kind of a thing I took for granted as being, oh, yeah, that was probably what the implication was, but after working through the Leftherian seals thing, I realized that this kind of only made sense if Rex was a descendant of Addam. Now, yeah, that might cheapen the effect of some of the things in the story to a few people, but it's very, very worth mentioning that Rex is definitely not the only descendant of Addam out there. As long as he had at least one kid, over 500 years, that family line is gonna spread a lot, and as I mentioned before, a lot of Leftherians probably carry his blood in their veins, and it is noted that Leftherians were commonly used by people to open the door to Elpis so they could get in and try to get down to whatever was in the bottom. That means that other Addam descendants existed. Rex just happened to be the one who grew up in the right place and was around in the right time and place to become the Aegis' driver. So, yeah, he's sort of special, but special in the same way that a large amount of members of one ethnic group can claim they're descended from royalty if their group was founded by some big famous royal person. So we got that out of the way. But let's take this theorizing one step further and figure out whether or not Rex and Zeke are related. This assuming Rex is a descendant of Addam. We do, of course, know as a fact that the Tantalus royal family is not descended from Addam, but at the end of the Golden Country, it is heavily, heavily implied that Tantal was founded by Zetter, brother of the last king of Torna and Addam's uncle. When he reveals the secret to Zeke, or however the hell you pronounce it, says that they are actually descended from a cadet branch. And I, and probably a lot of other people, interpreted that as military cadet or something. But it turns out cadet branch is actually a legitimate historical term relating to members of a royal family. Traditionally, it referred to the family lines of the younger sons of a ruling royal house, because of course the eldest son is usually the one to inherit the title and the throne. This at first seems to make things worse, because first off, we have no idea if Addam's the oldest child. Second off, we have no idea if Addam had any siblings at all. We just know that he's fourth in line to the throne after his father, Zetter, and someone else who would presumably be a non-bastard child of the king. Gender, age wouldn't matter. If you're pure blood, you're gonna get in there before the bastard dude. But then you realize that Zetter is a prince, not the king. The king is his brother, which means, in all likelihood, he is the younger brother of the king, so his family line would be a cadet branch relative to the last king of Torna. So, while yeah, it's not a cadet branch relative to Addam being the quote-unquote true king, it is a cadet branch of the last official king, so this actually makes perfect sense. Which would mean that if Rex is a descendant of Addam, and even more so if he's the most direct one, Rex and Zeke are actually really distant cousins. And that's honestly really cool, because I like how Zeke built his entire lifestyle around the persona of Addam, the one that was ingrained in the mind of the Tantalese people as the great legend from 500 years ago, and then it turns out he's not the direct descendant, and a lot of the stuff he knew about Addam was wrong, directly contradicted by Mithra and things we see about him in the Golden Country. But despite all that, not only is he a pretty close match to Addam personality-wise, but he's also the exact kind of person Addam was despite that. And while he might not have his blood in his veins, he's still royalty of Torna, and he was still a vital part in the Aegis ultimately succeeding in her goal. Plus, he eventually got to reconcile with his cousin and help the little chap do cool stuff and save the world, so it's honestly just really cool to think about that. But, with that done, thank you so much for watching as always. Like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already as always, because I need to start saying that again. Not really much else on this one. This is coming out on St. Patrick's Day, which I only realized after midnight when I started recording this. So, unfortunately, I can't do the Podrake-themed video that I thought of doing. That's probably going to be next week. But, yeah, besides that, I'm going to start Patreon soon, so look forward to that. And, of course, doing that means potentially unlocking Xenogears and Xenosaga. The last king of Torna is basically a carbon copy of Con Wong from Xenogears, so give me money so I can play Xenogears. Thanks. Till next time, though, this is Luxin, signing off.